I'm going to tell you which day trips you should not try to take when you visit Washington, D.C. Hello, welcome to Trip Hacks DC. My name is Rob. I'm a tour guide here in the nation's capital. If you're coming to Washington, D.C. and you're looking for the best tips, tricks, and hacks for exploring the city, make sure to subscribe to this channel and hit the bell notification icon so that you don't miss any future videos. And if you're interested in signing up for a Trip Hacks DC tour, head on over to triphacksdc.com afterwards to see the tours that we offer. I recently posted a video about possible day trips that you can take when you visit DC. If you haven't seen it yet, I will leave a link in the description so you can go check it out. In this video, I'm going to tell you about places where you might be tempted to try to take a day trip, but where you should resist that temptation. The reason these places make bad day trips is not because they're bad places to visit. In fact, it's usually exactly the opposite. It's because they're such great places to visit that a single day doesn't do it justice. So if you have been to any of these places, leave a comment on this video and let everyone know how many days you think would make for a good trip. With that said, let's get started. Number 1, Philadelphia. Now, I love Philadelphia. As a former capital of the country and a place where our founding fathers spent a lot of time, there is a ton of amazing history here. And that is the reason why it should not be a day trip. Philadelphia is a much bigger city than I think a lot of people realize. I mean, look, yes, you could pop up, look at the Liberty Bell, go to Independence Hall, and take a selfie in front of the Love statue. But then you'd be missing out on trying a bunch of cheesesteak places, running up the art museum stairs like Rocky, and checking out the museums along the Benjamin Franklin Parkway. So if you want to visit Philadelphia, I recommend at least one, if not more nights. That way you can see all of the main sites without it feeling totally rushed. Number 2, New York City. I don't recommend day trips to New York for the same reason why I don't recommend people visiting New York take a day trip to DC. They're actually not as close together as people seem to think. And spending only a single day there really does a disservice to how much each place has to offer. I totally get the appeal of day tripping to New York, especially if you live in a part of the country where everything is really far away. In theory, you could hop on an Amtrak train at Union Station and in a few hours be exploring in Midtown Manhattan. But in reality, the train takes about 3.5 hours, and the ticket, best case scenario, will cost you $50 each way. So if you're a family of 4, is spending $400 really worth it just to barely crack the surface of what New York has to offer? Say you took a 6 a.m. train out of Union Station. That would get you into New York around 9:30 a.m. To get back to DC before midnight, you would need to leave New York no later than 8:30 p.m. That's 7 hours of train riding for about 11 hours of New York exploring. And since you probably woke up at about 5 a.m. to make that 6 a.m. train, by the middle of the day, you're gonna feel completely wiped. I think that if you wanna go to New York, and you should because it's an awesome place to visit, it needs to be its own dedicated trip. Number 3, Williamsburg. I know some people are going to disagree with me on this one, but I think if you wanna go to Williamsburg, it needs to be an overnight trip. There are 2 main things that people go to Williamsburg to do. Busch Gardens, the European-themed amusement park, and Colonial Williamsburg, the living museum that gives you a chance to explore what the country was like, well, before it was a country. Now, Williamsburg is 150 miles away, and in ideal conditions, you could get there in 2.5 hours. That's not that much farther away than Charlottesville, which I did recommend as a day trip. But the problem with Williamsburg is that to get there, you have to drive on Interstate 95, which is infamous for having traffic and gridlock both on weekdays and on weekends. Plus, both Busch Gardens and Colonial Williamsburg are outdoor activities. So if you visit in the summer, you're gonna be spending a lot of time outside in the heat and humidity. So the idea of making that long drive back to DC afterwards makes me just feel exhausted. This is one of those things where when you're planning it and you're looking at it on a Google map, you think, yeah, this is totally doable. But then in the moment, you have serious regret. So if you do want to do Williamsburg, I recommend an overnight. And that gives you the benefit of being able to do both Busch Gardens and Colonial if you want to. Number 4, Virginia Beach. Washington, D.C. is an East Coast city, but we're not a coastal city. In my previous video, I recommended Annapolis as a great place to go to see the Chesapeake Bay. But the Chesapeake Bay doesn't have a lot of beaches, and if you really want to go to the beach, you really need to go to the Atlantic Ocean. The problem with trying to day trip to Virginia Beach is that it is just way too far. It's 200 miles from DC, and the Hampton Roads area has really notorious traffic. To get to Virginia Beach, you have to drive through a bridge tunnel, and traffic and backups can get really bad. If you do want to go to a beach, I recommend not trying to tack it on to a DC trip in this way. There are a lot of great Atlantic Ocean beaches, specifically around the Carolinas, but they really need to be their own trip, in my opinion. If you absolutely must day trip to a beach when you visit DC, the beaches in Delaware and Maryland are a lot closer. And that's it! Thank you for watching this video. If you found it helpful, you can subscribe to this channel by clicking on the Trip Hacks DC logo, which is popping up right now at the bottom of the screen. And if you're coming to DC and want to sign up for a Trip Hacks DC tour, you can click on the Capitol Dome on the left side of my head. That'll send you over to triphacksdc.com, where you can see all of the tours that we offer. Enjoy your trip!